job that the housing office here at Camp Pendleton has done, because all that information is collected from our area of operation here, all compiled and set up through the chain up to OSD, and then OSD then establishes and confirms BAH rates for locality for Camp Pendleton. The OSD policy is to have about 75% of the base loading numbers reside off base and 25% on the base. So we have a responsibility not only to the on-base folks, but to those off-base folks as well through the BAW data collection and rental listings process. When we go through the rental listing process, a part of what we do too is called crime mapping. So we look at those areas within our AOR that have high crime rates, the type of crimes, if there's a gang injunction over there, the type of gangs, their type of activity for that particular gang itself, and then I'm authorized to either include or exclude those track information that we collect from within this AOR to add to or not add to the submission for BAH. So our listings that we have for those folks that desire to live off base have been, one, the dwellings have been inspected, two, we've done the crime mapping, and then three, we've also checked the landlord lease to make sure it's got the military clause in there. So for those people that want to reside off base, they can come through us and get those listings, and we can also give them from whatever range of rent that they would like to pay. Not necessarily bought, but if they want lesser or whatever the case. We can provide those listings to them, and again, they've been inspected. We've also done the crime mapping, gang injunction, and check the lease for those areas before we list them in our office. There we go. So, aboard the installation here, we have 3 regions, 7 districts, and 22 housing areas. We have 7,795 homes aboard the installation to date. And that's kind of how we're configured. Right now, we have more than 1/3 the Marine Corps' total inventory right here aboard Camp Pendleton in the way of infrastructure. Right now, we're at about 86% occupancy. We're in the peak of the PCS where we get the ins and the outs. And we do have homes available for those that are seeking for them. I apologize, I'm having a little challenges with this. There we go. So on Camp Pendleton, again, talking about inventory, we have 7,795 homes. We just completed building 250 new homes in 2017 in the old ag field where Singing Sons used to grow tomatoes. Government took that back. We did a remediation. Now we're building housing in there. There's enough acreage left that if we plus up again for a 2-pronged war and we need a reach-back asset to build more homes, we've already have established location to build those homes with the infrastructure to support it in place already. So, how the PPV program works, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute, is each partner owns, maintains, and operates their inventory per the business agreement. They're the managing member, not the Navy Marine Corps. They're the managing members. So they have ownership of day-to-day operations. The Lincoln partner has the 7,083 homes. 6 of those homes are GOQs that they oversee, and 1 is an installation commander's home, and then the rest is broken out between officer and enlisted. The Hunt, which is actually Duluth's housing area, has 712 homes. They're a separate partner under a separate business agreement. Hunt was the very first pilot PPV program for the Marine Corps, so that contractual agreement is written slightly different than the Lincoln business agreement is written. Back in 1996, Congress decided that the DOD needed to partner with private sector in order to fix the DOD-wide housing problems. Back then, the way that the money flowed is the BAH that service members paid up through the OSD and down to the service levels. That was almost like a blank check back in the day. So you had commanders at different levels. As that money, BAW money, filtered back down the chain, they pulled it for other uses. For example, NMCI program, when it first started, $25 million of housing money, BAH, was used as seed money to start that contract. It did not come back into the housing arena to be reutilized for roofs, doors, windows, so on and so forth. Also, at one time when the money came down and we were configured slightly different, where our chain of command was via MAR-4 PAC, then to LFF-3 there at headquarters, they had pulled some of that money to refit some A-1 Abrams tanks. So the money flow down the chain, people would pull as needed. Since then, we've privatized, because this protects the BAW money. This protects the housing money that comes from headquarters Marine Corps down the chain. I have my own line of accounting now here aboard the base. So I'm almost like a parent command aboard the base. No one can touch my funding stream at all but me. I'm the only one that can obligate it. So right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm responsible for that fund. With the BAH, that goes right to the partner to go back in to the business module in order to maintain the homes. So different world now with the way the money flows because of the privatization in 1996. With them privatizing in 1996, what it did too is it required the partners throughout, and I'm not talking just Pendleton, but throughout OSD, to bring monies in order to close these particular business agreements. There's certain financial leverage that they are required to meet by congressional standards in order to close each phase of each privatization deal, which means the leverage is a 1-to-3. So the Dawn or the OSD puts in 1/3 the amount of funds that's going to be required to close that particular phase of a PPV privatization deal, and the private partner's got to bring in 2/3 of those funds in order to meet the funding requirement to close these phases, which means that the partner has a greater risk if the PPV program has failed. And that's how the Congress and the OSD wanted to set it up. So the partners, they have private investors, they have bank investors, they're on the stock market, so on and so forth, because they have to bring these folks in to fund them in order to fund these deals, in order for OSD to put their 1/3 into their 2/3 in order to make each phase able to close and sustain during the period of a 50-year agreement. So these are 50-year long agreements that are written. So they're a long time. Probably too long, but that's not my lane. But they're 50-year agreements. So they bring all this money in, we're able to build newer homes quicker, remodel homes quicker than whatever the Milcon project could ever do at the speed that those operate at. The partners, again, like I mentioned earlier, they're responsible for day-to-day operations, even with the GOQs and the installation commanders' homes. So the one thing, the lease agreement that is signed is between that resident and that particular partner. The Dawn has no play in that lease agreement. That's between the two entities. I want to move on to, we started this 3-step process about 2 years ago. In the business agreement, it says that the resident has to work up through the partner and then up through to the government. There was a number of steps in that process. So the language that's written in this agreement that related to this was pretty loose. So what we've done is we've gotten together and say we need to make it not 6, 7 steps, but more like 3 steps. So we've been pushing this 3-step process for the last couple years. If a resident or a service member has an issue in housing, they go to their district manager, then to the regional and the VP. Then the 3rd step is to come across to my office. And then once it hits my office, then I have action on it once it hits within my arena. It is extremely important that we push this 3-step process. And you all don't have to write this down, because if you want a copy of this brief, I'll email it to you, just so you have it, so you don't have to sit there and take pictures and write it down. I'll use the system where I got your email account. Just let me know before you leave if you want a copy, and we'll push it out to you. So in this 3-step process, the last couple of years, we have found that it has worked real well because it gets issues to the government side much quicker than what it had in the past. And it gets notification to us of an issue sooner than later. So extremely important that we use this process here. And when I personally go out to a number of homes that have any type of mold or any type of pest issues or safety issues, or I also go out to all the homes that for these high users of energy audits. I'm personally out there. I'm spread thin. I'm one deep, but I hit it, every one of them, as much as I can, and be able to take a look at these things with the partners and then come to resolve and not have to half-step and have issues, festate and go on for a period of time. But the 3-step process really, really has proven itself to get notification to us sooner than later. With this process, too, there's no time limit. So if a resident calls the district manager on said date and district manager doesn't get back to them by the next day or later that afternoon and there's a sense of urgency, they go right to step 2. And if they're not satisfied after talking to the RPM or the VP, they go right to step 3. That could be done within a day. There's no time limit on it. Some people think, well, I'm going to give them the check. No. If there's a health and safety issue that's taking place that the resident feels that could affect them, then it should be, the battle rhythm should be quick. So here's some of the phone numbers to the district offices. And again, I'll push this brief out to whoever wants it so you don't have to write all this down. Okay, now we'll talk about some recap here. So in 1996, when they started the privatization program, 2 years later, they rolled in with amending these business agreements that were set in 1996 to establish the language in there that the partners can charge for overage on utilities, meaning all utilities. Not just electricity, but all utilities, sewer, water, gas, etc. So that language was written into the agreement. Then in 2012, Commandant of the Marine Corps at the time, he said, okay, it's our turn to kick off this reset program and we're only going to charge for electricity. The rest of it, we're not going to charge for. He ran a pilot program in 2010, both in Hawaii and then on the East Coast at Cherry Point. That way you get the cheapest and the most expensive per kilowatt hour. They did a test on it for about 18, 19 months. Then they rolled out the program. We all rolled it out. Again, it's a DOD-driven program for execution. Marine Corps was the last one to come on board with it. Not that we're always the first, but we were the last one to come on board. The other services were already in the execution phases of the energy programs that they had out there. The Army had about 6 different versions of the program because of how their RCI program works. It's more installation level agreements that are written. So I attended a meeting a couple years ago and we walked and talked through, and now they pulled back their program and they're rewriting it to mirror the Dawn Navy Marine Corps. This program was audited by the Commandant of the Marine Corps 2 years ago. By the Naval Audit Service, came out and did a full audit on the Marine Corps' reset program, and they had no findings. Everything was set correctly to the intent of the program. So we're in good position on that. For the Government Housing Office, we are the administrative oversight for that program. But the execution is the partners. So for Lincoln Partner, you have Yes Energy. For Duluth, you have Manol. But they have the same functions and same execution of the program. Sorry about this clicker here. I got to get closer. So when we kicked it off, we had to start with establishing what's called like-type groups from the different housing areas, which are like when you go buy a car, year, make, model, amenities. We had to mesh them all together in like-type groups. Once we put that package together, Then the next step was to make sure every home had a smart meter on it. So every home was given an SDG&E smart meter. Once we got that in the readings and they were checked to make sure they were working correctly, then how the program works is depending on your like-type group as to where you're at, you'll all be bundled together. And is it a competitive program? Yes, it is. And so what happens is they take the total use for that like-type group and they'll take out the variables of the top 5%, the bottom 5%, because top 5% is going to pay per kilowatt hour, and the bottom 5% is going to get reduced and get the refund per kilowatt hours. Then they're going to take out any home that isn't occupied for a period of that full 30-day cycle of that billing. They're going to also exclude those folks that are EFMP and wounded warrior folks that are excluded from this program because of medical requirements. Once they've taken out all those variables, then they have a total use left, and that's what establishes the baseline. Then they have 10% above and 10% below. Now, here's a notional chart of it up here. I don't know, this thing's not working too well. So on the top there, example billing. So it's a running baseline. It's every month it's calculated. And every month for those like-type groups, winter, summer, it adjusts accordingly. So the folks that are in the top 5%, the folks that are above the 10% baseline for every kilowatt hour, they pay that kilowatt hour rate. The kilowatt hour rate's on the back of their bill. Now, about half the inventory is on SDG&E right now, and about the other housing inventory is on base DAWN distribution system. The difference is SDG&E is two-tiered and has winter and summer rates, and it could go up as high as this year to 54 cents a kilowatt hour. The base distribution system is on a flat 11 cents per kilowatt hour. Those homes that are on the base distribution system are the older homes. The newer homes are on the SDG&E. Okay. So when people say, well, I live over here and my bill is X amount of dollars and I had the same amount of usage you did over here, well, the difference is in the monetary piece of it is because of whatever kilowatt hours they're paying. Also, when we go out to do, well, let me back up. Anytime that anyone thinks there's an issue with their home, very first course of action should be to call for an energy audit. That's the very first course of action. I've gone out on these energy audits, and there's some variables out there, such as if the refrigerator was not functioning properly for a period of time, and we show during the maintenance cycle where they called in and replaced the refrigerator and that refrigerator motor was straining, the benefit of the doubt goes to the resident. And these little things add up. So we look at everything. We de-energize the home. We take the resident outside, show them on the meter, on the 99 code, where it shows it's zeroed out, meaning there's no power going to that home. Then we will have the residents stand with us as we power up certain items to show them where their high usage and low usage is at. For those folks that typically come from the East Coast, historically bring electric dryers. It's just what we've seen. So those electric dryers, not all of them are Star Energy type. So when we power down the home, de-energize it, zero out, re-energize the home and let it come to its normal usage. Then we'll plug in that dryer and they can see it jumps 5 kilowatt hours by itself. So unfortunately, this state is the second highest in our nation for cost per kilowatt hours. Hawaii being the highest, us being the second highest cost. So what we do is we'll walk them, talk them, and help them with the process of understanding where they can save in other places if they elect to keep the dryer or to offset the balance to help them out with staying below that upper buffer. We also, when we go out on the energy audits, and that's this bottom chart here. This is a chart from an actual home to where from the time they moved in to the change, resident prior to them, to the change of occupancy, which occurred right during that time period and then the time that they moved in. So we can track daily and hourly use too. Because what we've been finding as well is they'll turn on the HVAC fan, leave it on. Let it run 24/7. So that consumes quite a bit. So we sit with them, and where we can shave off any bill we do, we take the opportunity to do so to be fair and equitable to the program. So we waive it off, and then we try to start them from a good starting point and with a lot of tips to help them to stay within that buffer. But I will tell you, though, there was a period of time where Home Depot had one heck of a sale on deep freezers. Because about every home we went into, there's a deep freezer in the garage, and those deep freezers were under blankets, cardboard, you name it, air conditioning. Walked in and found 4. The bill was real high, so I said, I'm going out to that house. I want to take a look to see what the issue is here. So I walked in, and there's 400-gallon tanks with 4 heat lamps on each one of them for the iguanas that they had in there to keep the ambient heat correct, for the animals, for its environment. So I've seen it all. Some of it's amazing to me, and some of it I still shake my head to try to figure out why you'd have floor heaters on in the summer to just keep your feet warm. It's individual how folks operate themselves, but we do everything we can to assist with giving them tips to reduce their cost. Here's a Yes Energy bill. So as you look at where these arrows are pointed, the arrows are pointed where they have their own websites where the residents can go in, log in, and they can actually log into their own account and see their usage, see their own usage. The second one is a home energy request if there's an issue with the bill. On the back of the bill, it gives a 12-month rolling chart. So if they live in there for 3 months, it'll give 90 days. They live in there for 13 months, it'll give the last 12-month rolling usage, upper, lower buffer, where they fell into, so on and so forth, what kilowatt hours they use, and then the rate structure, depending on if they're in DON distribution system or SDG&E distribution system. Okay, so if account becomes delinquent, $25 or more, what happens is in 21 days after the due date, the notice is on the bill that there's a delinquency of X amount. And it continues to run each month. Then after another period of 45 days, they're going to get an actual notice from the PPV partner. Then beyond the 90 days, and if they broach a $500 threshold, then they contact us. And per Marine Corps policy with the program, then we contact the command, notify of the delinquency. We are not a collection agent for the partner. We just notify the command that there's a delinquency out there so they can address it appropriately within their command.
Do you ever shut the utilities off?
No.
Why?
Why would you?
They don't pay the bills.
I know. Out in town they do. We don't do it on the base. Out in town, they shut it off after a period of time, even though when they do shut them off out in town, there's legal process they have to go through. They just don't arbitrarily go out and shut off the electricity, gas, especially during the winter months. Judges will tear up the landlords or the municipality by doing it during the holidays. So we don't do it on the base. We don't shut them off. Never have. Probably a better way to do it, but that's not in the Marine Corps guidance. Marine Corps guidance is notification, and then from that point on, the partner does have an option to either roll it up in the rent rolls or to take them to collection. So we prefer to resolve in-house first. So this is last year's recap of the what was paid in, what was paid out, who's in band, who's out band for 2018. 2019 will be coming out in January because it's on calendar year and not fiscal year. So on this thing? There we go. So, and just on the reset program too, we work with the partners. And I'm going to tell you straight up, I've gone out and there has been a few issues with some of the homes not properly performing. So what we do is we take them out of live billing, put them back into mock billing, reimburse them for any cost that they have, fix whatever that issue is, test it for a 90-day period, and then put them back into live billing. Because that's a fair and equitable thing to do if the home is not performing correctly. So, and we found a few of those out there. The Lincoln partner for San Onofre area had executed about a $1.3 million project to have a third party go out, check all the meters and the lines and all this and that before implementation of the program. That's why they didn't start in 2012. They started 18 months later. Because we wanted to go out there and have this third party agent check all these meters, make sure no street lights are tied in or any homes are cross-wired into each other to where we're not getting true meter reads. So that project was about 18 months, and they had gone into the live billing 18 months later till that was verified. For the new initiatives coming out, I'm sure people have heard about some of the congressional hearings that have been taking place and some of the issues with housing across all OSD. And we have our pieces of the pie here too as well. So what's been worked on over the past year with the Congress and the service level secretaries along with OSD is they're looking at drafting a common lease that doesn't have near the amount of legal language in it. Because when you read it from a lawyer's perspective, a lawyer probably understands that. For example, one of the line items in there that's being written, and this has not been signed off yet, so it's just still in the final draft to be presented. For example, they're going to plus my office up by about 18 more full-time federal employees because I don't have the manpower to provide the level of oversight requirements that they want. So all the offices across OSD, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all being plussed up. A part of this plus up is that I will have QA, QC folks, which I don't have right now. So they'll go out and they'll look at these different events and they'll make a determination on time and space as to when the repair should have been done. If it's not done in that, whether it should have been done within that time and space, then that ball gets returned to that full ball gets returned to that family per day. So that's one of the things that are in the lease, or I'm sorry, in the Bill of Rights. So the other things in the Bill of Rights talk about reporting, which is like our 3-step process. And then also if the landlord, which is the PPV partner, if there's other issues outside of maintenance, that they have certain timelines with both parties to come to resolve, et cetera, et cetera. But the big thing about the Bill of Rights that I think is a good thing is that if a partner across OSD is not performing correctly, then that BAH will go back to that family, even though the partner may be putting them up in a hotel or in a corporate house, they'll still get their BAH back, which is a good thing. So that's a good thing in the Bill of Rights. But that's also out there as a draft that's being reviewed. I believe that right now it's at its stage where the service secretaries are in their final review before they present it to the committee, Congress, to review and approve it, and then they'll go off, sign it. Then at that point, it'll be in effect. Right now, in these business agreements, how they were written over the years, in certain cases, certain services have them written in a way that it's like a fire and forget program. Like, we're going to privatize housing, we give it to the private partner as the managing member, they'll do all the execution, et cetera, et cetera. With that comes incentive fees for performance. So with that performance piece was in certain areas within maintenance and in other areas that they could pull certain percentage of funding based off the financial module. Don had no play to say no, no, and no. So now what they're doing, the congressional folks because this is a congressionally approved program. They have ownership on this as well. The Congress does. So they're looking at restructuring that incentive fee and how that process goes and how that works, and want to write language into the agreement to where installation commanders have a discretionary percentage decision on that fee. So if their performance is X, X, and X, and say CG, Brigadier General Conley, if he's here when this gets signed off on, then I would have that discussion with him, and then we would establish a discretionary piece of performance for what they're going to get paid of that incentive fee. So if their performance is low, they get paid low. If it's high, then they'll get paid high. So that's a good thing that they're restructuring that, but that's probably a ways down the road because there's a lot of discussions with a lot of folks that are involved in that restructuring and the incentive fee piece. But when it does come about, the installation commanders will have a discretionary percentage of that overall fee, which right now does not have. Resident responsibilities, that's another thing the congressional folks, along with OSD and the service level secretaries, are adding in both resident rights and the responsibilities of the residents, because as some of us know, and maybe more of us know, that sometimes you go into some of these homes and it's absolutely terrible. And so they've let maintenance slip because they have not reported, because they don't want anyone to go in and see the condition of the home. And so consequently, then we just started domino effect on other issues. So that's why the resident responsibilities came out to say, you as a resident are responsible for this. If you do these things and a landlord's not doing this, that's where the Bill of Rights fits. So that's why the resident responsibilities will roll out as well. And there's a lot of discussion in each one of these. And honestly, I can't tell you as I'm standing here as to which one will be rolled out when. I don't know. Some of those are a lot more challenging than others to go back and change business agreements. So I wanted to back, and I apologize, there's a slide that, I want to talk about the CEL survey. I want to back up here for just a minute. If it will work for me. See if I can get one more click. Okay, so when we talk about the incentive fee structure, there's a CEL survey. This Christopher E. Lee survey is actually the gentleman who owns the company. They send it out, this survey, to all residents across the different installations. On those surveys, it's so important that residents take those and mark them fair and equitably. If they're not happy, write it out. If they're happy, write it out. If they're not happy because of X, X, and X, they need to write it out. They need to notify folks if there's issue or if the resident isn't happy in any of the housing areas. That survey scores are a part of this incentive fee. So when the partners get those scores in, depending on how they score, will depend on what percent they draw from the pot of incentive fee direct. So what that means to all of us on the government side is that we really need residents to respond to those CEL surveys and fairly, write out. If they're not happy, they're not happy. It's okay. Then we can address it. But at the same time, if they're happy and good, then they can say that they are. But what's critical, though, is they fill these things out in response. This year, we're coming to the point of almost survey fatigue. So we've sent out a number of surveys that came from Congress, a survey that came from OSD, the annual surveys for the PPV partners, then the Marine Corps sending out their own individual survey in November. So I've had 4 surveys this year. Even though we're being surveyed to death, just getting the words out and letting them know that it's so important that they fill those things out, because that's a direct feedback from the residents that's critical and important. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing here too is in the future, I'm going to be giving open house briefs. And that's the schedule. And that's when I'll be doing it with the 3 with Lincoln, with the central, northern, and southern area, and then with Duluth on these dates. It's an opportunity for those folks that living in housing along with spouses to come along, come to these open houses, and they have the opportunity to meet with the senior leadership of both those partners because they will be in attendance. And they can go knee to knee with them, talk to them, voice their concerns, or if they're happy, that's great too, but if they're not happy, it's an opportunity to voice their concerns at these open houses after my brief. So, if we get that word out, and it went out through the partnership, it also went out through Colonel Holt, I think, sent it to all the different folks, chiefs of staff and all those other folks. But I encourage them to please come to these. And if they have a concern, come and voice them. They're not going to get beat up. We need to hear some feedback. And that's the important piece. So please encourage if they can make it. And for whatever reason, too, that they can't attend in person, there's going to be a live feed through that partner's Facebook account. So through Lincoln's Facebook account, it'll be a live feed where they can attend right there in their living room or den or wherever they have their computer set up. They can key in questions, and we will answer questions through the live feed as well. So we'll have live feeds in each one of these. Now, if for whatever reason, when we talk about like central, northern, and southern area, they can log in or come to any of them. They don't have to live in that area. They can come to any of these that they want to attend. The more the merrier. We've done this for 2 years running. This is the 3rd year. And folks that do show up, it gives an opportunity to voice their concerns out there, or those folks that come with certain ideas. I mean, I've had people raise their hand and say, Mr. Marshall, I don't have a meter on my house. Okay, I know every house has got a meter. That's okay. So I told them, we'll go out, we'll take a peek see. Went out and took a peek see. They just, on a fourplex, didn't know which one was theirs. It's got a mark on it that says, XXX, C, A, B, C, or D. So it's a learning experience. It's okay. It's all right. And so we get down to even that minute point, and that's all right too, because we'll take that for action and go out and we'll take a peek see and we'll show them where their meter's at, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about the meter and how it functions too, and how they can read it in the future. Okay, so that's what I have. Again, I do want to apologize for the delay. We had some AV issues there, but I want to open it up for some questions. Yes, ma'am?